Audiences have been gripped by Dune Part 2's tale of prophecy, love, and holy war. But what does Muad'dib's rise mean for the universe and the future of the Dune franchise? Dune Part 2 picks up right where the first one left off. After witnessing the total obliteration of his life and his house, Paul Atreides and his mother Jessica have taken refuge with the Fremen, the native people of the desert planet of Arrakis. The Padishah Emperor Shaddam Carino IV and his ally Baron Vladimir Harkonnen consider the Fremen to be a nuisance, a minor inconvenience, but Paul knows differently. Paul's father, the late Duke Leto Atreides, recognized that the Fremen were a formidable force and planned to make an alliance with them to fight the Emperor.
Here on Caladan, we've ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
In the first movie, Leto had his best warrior, Duncan Idaho, make contact with the Fremen and begin diplomatic relations. This paid dividends, as a Fremen leader called Stilgar did not immediately kill Paul on sight, but was willing to hear him out. Most of Part 2 deals with Paul learning to be one with the Fremen, becoming accustomed to their ways and integrating into their culture, while resisting the urge to become their religious leader as part of the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib. While Paul's father paved the way for Paul to have an army, Jessica and the Bene Gesserit Order paved the way for him to have an entire cult devoted to his name. For centuries, Bene Gesserit missionaries sowed the seeds of superstition amongst the Fremen, spreading myths and prophecies about the coming of a Messiah, the Lisan al-Gaib, the son of a Bene Gesserit. From the moment Paul and Jessica arrived on Arrakis, the people started seeing the signs. There's another equally important aspect of Paul's rise to power that Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 mostly skips: the ecology of Arrakis. This is mostly context found in the appendices of the novel. In the book, we learn of Liet Kynes' father, Pardo. Like Liet, Pardo was an imperial paleontologist who was the first such scholar to study Arrakis, where most saw the planet as cruel and uninhabitable. Kynes saw a world ready to be reshaped, a paradise in the making. When he met the Fremen, Kynes would speak of oceans, grass, and date palms. His every word became gospel to the Fremen, who took to Kynes' 500-year plan to turn the hostile world into a paradise. Over the years, Kynes introduced greenery to Arrakis, as well as various desert animals. The more he did, the holier he became to the Fremen, who considered him a prophet. Even after Kynes was killed in a cave-in, his daughter, or son in the books, carried on the work. This strand of the narrative is mostly developed in Dune Part 1, and elements of Kynes' work are hinted at throughout the film.
As Emperor Dr. Kynes, I can make a paradise for Arrakis with a wave of my hand.
That said, Kynes' work is essential to Paul's story in Dune Part 2. The moment Paul says that the Fremen dream of a green Arrakis is now also his dream, and that he will take them to paradise, the Fremen fervently fall in behind him. From pretty much the moment Paul is introduced to the Fremen, they are ready to embrace him as their savior. All Paul has to do is reach out and harness the desert power his father hoped for. The problem is that Paul knows that power also brings disaster. Ever since the events of the first movie, Paul has been fully aware that the Fremen were manipulated into accepting him as a leader. What's more, throughout Dune Part 2, Paul struggles with visions of an impending disaster that will come about if he becomes a leader of the Fremen. In his name, billions will die across the universe. Though many start believing the signs, Paul's lover Chani is more skeptical of an outsider becoming a Fremen messiah. She is the only one who sees a problem with the zealotry around Paul. Sadly, she is not enough to dissuade the masses, especially once Jessica begins to spread his gospel around the Fremen tribes. As much as Paul tries to deny his path, the Fremen are ready for their messiah, and who can blame them? If the holy plan they've been preparing for can be reduced a few centuries, that seems like a pretty sweet deal. Then there's House Harkonnen, back in control of Arrakis. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen now sets his sights on the throne of the known universe, plotting against Shaddam IV to replace him with his nephew, Fade Rotha. As Paul and the Fremen disrupt the spice melange trade on Arrakis, the Baron appoints Fade to lead the charge on Arrakis. Though Paul is initially content with waging a small guerrilla war against the Harkonnens, everything changes when an all-out attack by Fade Rotha destroys the Fremen hideout of Sietch Tabor. Ingesting the water of life and gaining greater prescience of the future only strengthens his resolve. Paul declares himself the Lisan al-Gaib and takes control of the Fremen. With the help of an entire planet's worth of Fremen warriors and the family atomics at his disposal, Muad'dib goes on the offensive, declaring all-out war on the Emperor himself. Though Chani continues to be resistant to the idea of the Lisan al-Gaib, she cannot stop the zealotry. Muad'dib and the Fremen mount an attack on the city of Arrakeen, using sandworms and atomics to obliterate the Harkonnen army. Then Muad'dib forces the Emperor to abdicate the throne after winning a thrilling knife fight with Fade Rotha.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
In the wake of his victory, Paul threatens to destroy Arrakis' supply of spice, potentially upending the entire universe, unless the Emperor abdicates and offers his daughter as a wife. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the great houses don't accept the young Atreides' ascendancy, so Muad'dib declares war on the rest of the universe. As he feared, the prophecy is fulfilled, and a Fremen jihad begins in Paul's name. Frank Herbert's Dune was many things. It was a meticulous exploration of how ecology impacts every aspect of the universe, from flora and fauna to religion and culture. It was also a traditional hero's journey of a young boy waging war against an empire. But more than anything, Dune is a story about the dangers of messianic figures. Denis Villeneuve's film adaptation sadly ignores or rushes through many aspects of the Dune books, but that also means Dune Part 2 has enough time to fully explore the horrors of Paul's messianic turn. At no point does the movie try to make Muad'dib a hero, or even someone we should root for. And there's no clearer hint of this than Stilgar's role. Bardem's portrayal of the Fremen leader is almost cartoonish in how comically fanatical he is. Every time Paul does pretty much anything, he preaches it as a sign that he is the Lisan al-Gaib. If Paul says he is not the Lisan al-Gaib, Stilgar takes it as proof of the humility the real Lisan al-Gaib would have.
I am not the Messiah, do you understand? Honestly!
Only the true Messiah denies his divinity. What?
Another telling sign of the Fremen's horrific devotion to Paul can be seen when the Fremen burn bodies in the aftermath of the Battle of Arrakeen. We learn early in the movie that the Fremen value water above all else, but rather than harvest the water of the dead Harkonnens, they decide to burn their bodies, a clear indication of the corruptive nature of their zealotry toward Paul Muad'dib.
All right, I am the Messiah! He is the Messiah! Now, off!
This also paves the way for a crucial future plot point. In later Dune books, various characters, including Stilgar, become concerned that the Fremen have abandoned their old ways, and this includes forgetting the sacred importance of water preservation. Chani's altered role is quite effective in Dune Part 2. Rather than a mere partner in battle, she's Paul's biggest critic throughout the movie. At every turn, Chani calls Paul out on the dangers of an outsider leading the Fremen. And if there is any doubt that Paul's rise to power is meant to be a bad thing, remember that the first Dune preempts Paul's first appearance with this.
Why did the Emperor choose this path? And who will our next oppressors be?
If you're an anime fan, watching Dune Part 2 might make you think of Attack on Titan and Aaron's story, which also involves a protagonist trapped by his desire for revenge, becoming a monstrous messianic figure. The anime played Aaron's morals ambiguously for a long while, keeping the audience at arm's length of Aaron's motivations, which allowed audiences to debate whether he was right or wrong until the end. That is not the case with Dune Part 2, however. The movie avoids ambiguity by staying locked in Paul's perspective and showing us his premonitions. From the very beginning, Paul and the audience are fully aware of where his path leads. This makes his resistance to the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib relatable too, because we understand the desire to avenge those we love. Paul is never afraid of things getting out of control. Instead, he's worried about them going his way. When he sets his plan in motion and it starts working, it hurts. Paul may have avenged his father's death. He may have won a battle, but at what cost? We've known for a while that Denis Villeneuve wants to adapt the second book in Herbert's series, Dune Messiah, bringing an end to his trilogy. Now that Dune Part 2 has been released, it's easy to see why. Without spoiling too much, Dune Messiah continues Paul's story by focusing on the aftermath of his holy war. Paul has brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to his new empire, but he also killed billions upon billions of people. Infamously, one scene in the book has Paul compare himself to Adolf Hitler, and not entirely unfavorably either. Dune Messiah makes it abundantly clear that Paul is no hero, as Herbert wrote the novel in response to audiences misunderstanding the message of his original novel.
What is the message? What is the statement that you're attempting to make here?
Don't trust leaders to always be right.
Of course, this isn't particularly surprising, given how other movies and stories featuring morally defunct protagonists continue to be misunderstood to this day. As Villeneuve once said, "My adaptation of Dune is closer to his idea that it's actually a warning against messiahs and heroes. To fully bring the idea home, we need to see the destruction Paul causes, not just in liberating Arrakis, but in invading and sterilizing other worlds. We need to see the consequences of him starting a cult, a religion in his name. We need a reckoning for Paul. If Villeneuve succeeds, it would do what the Star Wars prequels attempted but failed to properly sell, a tragedy about a young boy who hoped to be a hero but found himself becoming a monster feared throughout the universe." Of course, there are other things to look forward to if Villeneuve makes Dune Messiah. Key among them is his promise to show how exactly the Fremen get off their sandworms. But one thing the filmmaker should keep in mind if he gets to finish his trilogy is to bring forth the ecological element of the books. Dune Part 2 does a good job of showing how connected the ecology of Arrakis is to Fremen culture, from the plants to the water to the animal life. Dune Messiah is in every way a rebuke of Paul as a leader, and that includes his promise to turn Arrakis into a paradise. While the Lynch movie ended with rain falling on Arrakis for the first time without actually bothering to show the implications of this, Dune Messiah is much more wary of this plan. Without getting too spoilery, any plan to make Arrakis green is bound to have disastrous consequences for the Fremen and the universe at large. A movie that manages to convey this could make for a devastating and quite memorable tragedy that further reinforces Paul's status as a tragic figure. Beyond that, who knows? Villeneuve doesn't seem quite so keen to adapt the other books in the series, even if it sadly means depriving the audience of a human-worm hybrid in God Emperor of Dune. But another filmmaker could pick up where he leaves off. And with HBO's upcoming series Dune Prophecy due for release in 2024, it's fair to say that Dune Part 3 might not be the last we'll see of Frank Herbert's universe.